The night I confessed my affair to my husband was the night I thought my life was over. I watched his face crumble, his chest rise and fall like he could not breathe, and I felt the weight of my sin crush me. I had betrayed the only man who had ever truly loved me, and I was certain I had destroyed everything. Yet, in that very moment of my deepest shame, when my life seemed ruined beyond repair, God showed me that His grace is greater than my greatest failure. Before I begin, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all my subscribers for supporting this channel. Your encouragement means more than you know. To all my new viewers and those who keep coming back but have not yet subscribed, I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button. It is the fuel that keeps this channel alive and helps spread these life-changing stories of hope and faith. And please, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters here. My name is Sarah Miller. I am a 34-year-old wife and mother living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Tennessee, USA. My husband, David, is 36, a hard-working man with calloused hands and a gentle heart. We have been married for 10 years, and we share 2 beautiful children, Ethan, who is 8, and Lily, who just turned 5. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, the neat little house, the Sunday church routine, the smiling family photos. But inside, I was restless. I wanted passion, excitement, and something beyond the daily grind of marriage and motherhood. That hunger, unchecked and unguided by prayer, led me down a dark road that almost destroyed me, my marriage, and my faith. It started small. Temptation rarely comes in like a thunderstorm. It usually begins as a drizzle, soft enough to make you think it is harmless. I worked part-time at a local gym, managing the front desk and helping with membership sign-ups. That is where I met Jason. He was a new trainer, tall, confident, and charming. He knew how to make a woman feel seen, and I cannot lie, I enjoyed the attention. At first, it was innocent. Quick jokes at the desk, a smile as he walked past, little compliments that made me feel alive again. But soon, those small moments became longer conversations. He asked about my marriage, and I confessed more than I should have. I told him how David was always tired from work, how I felt unnoticed, how our passion had faded. Jason listened in a way that made me feel valued, like I was the most important person in the room. That was the bait, and I swallowed it whole. The first time we crossed the line, it was after a late shift at the gym. I told myself it was just a kiss, but deep down, I knew I had already betrayed my vows. Sin never stays small. That kiss became something more, and before long, I was sneaking around, hiding text messages, and living a double life. Each time I was with Jason, there was a rush, a thrill that made me forget who I was. But the moment I came home, the guilt hit me like a storm. I would tuck my kids into bed, look into my husband's tired but loving eyes, and feel like a fraud. I remember one Sunday morning in particular. We were sitting in church, and the pastor preached about David and Bathsheba, about how sin always leads to destruction, no matter how carefully you try to hide it. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt like the pastor was speaking directly to me, as if God Himself was shining a spotlight on my secret. But instead of confessing, I hardened my heart. I told myself I could manage it, that nobody had to know. But sin always finds its way out. It was a Tuesday evening when David found the messages on my phone. I had been careless, too wrapped up in my secret world to notice how distant I had become at home. When he confronted me, my world shattered. "Sarah," he said, his voice shaking, "what is this?" He held out my phone, Jason's name glowing on the screen. In that moment, I saw the devastation in his eyes. He looked like a man who had been stabbed in the back by the person he trusted most. My knees gave out, and I collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I confessed everything. The late nights, the lies, the affair. I expected David to scream, to throw me out, to tell me our marriage was over. And part of me believed I deserved it. But he did not. He sat in silence for what felt like forever. Then he said something that changed me. "I do not know how to forgive you right now, Sarah. But I know God forgave me when I was at my worst. So I will try. Not because you deserve it, but because he calls me to love the way he loves. That was the moment my life changed forever. Not because I got away with what I did, but because I realized how undeserving I was of mercy, and yet how freely God gives it. I went upstairs that night and fell on my knees beside my bed. For the first time in years, I prayed from the deepest part of my soul. I asked God to break me, to cleanse me, to rebuild me into a woman who could be faithful, not just to my husband, but to him. The morning after my confession felt like waking up in a war zone. Nothing looked different in my house, the same family photos on the wall, the same coffee mug waiting on the counter, the same toys scattered across the living room floor. But the atmosphere was heavy, almost suffocating. It was as if the walls themselves knew what I had done. David barely looked at me that morning. He got the kids ready for school in silence, moving like a man who had lost his compass. When he finally walked out the door for work, he did not kiss me goodbye. He just said, "We will talk tonight," his voice flat and tired. The shame I felt was unbearable. I had not just broken my vows, I had betrayed a man who had done nothing but love me. I had lied to my children with every bedtime kiss and every smile across the dinner table. And worse, I had dishonored God, the very one I claimed to serve. That day, I could not stop replaying David's words in my mind, "Not because you deserve it, but because he calls me to love the way he loves." I knew forgiveness was possible through Christ, but the idea that David might truly forgive me felt impossible. That night, after the kids went to bed, we sat at the kitchen table in silence. David finally broke it. "I need to know everything," he said. "Not details I cannot handle, but the truth. No more lies. If there is any chance of us rebuilding, it has to start with honesty." So I told him everything, not in graphic detail, but enough for him to understand how far I had fallen. I admitted to every lie, every hidden message, every excuse. By the time I finished, he had tears running down his face. He did not yell, he did not curse, he just sat there, broken. "Sarah," he whispered, "do you want this marriage? Do you want me? Or do you want him?" That question cut deeper than any sword. Jason was nothing but a shadow of sin now. What I wanted, more than anything, was to save the man in front of me, the father of my children, the one who had chosen mercy over rage. "I want you," I said through sobs. "I want our family. I want to be the woman you thought you married. I do not want him. I do not want that life. I want God to change me." For the first time since my confession, David looked me in the eyes. His gaze was filled with hurt, but also with something else, resolve. "Then this is not going to be easy," he said. "It will take time. It will take work. It will take God. But if you are willing, then so am I." What I had not prepared for was the judgment of others. Secrets do not stay secrets in small communities. Within weeks, whispers spread in church circles. Some friends stopped calling. Others looked at me with pity, as if I was a hopeless case. One Sunday, after service, a woman approached me and said bluntly, "I cannot believe what you did to David. He deserves so much better." Her words stung, but the truth is, she was right. He did deserve better. But instead of sinking deeper into shame, I realized something. Shame does not heal, but grace does. And God's grace was not just extended to me in private, it was a gift I had to walk in publicly, even when others doubted me. I started seeing a Christian counselor, and David came with me to some sessions. The process was brutal at times. Every session forced us to face our wounds head-on, to pull apart the layers of anger, mistrust, and pain. There were nights when David slept on the couch, nights when I cried myself to sleep, nights when I doubted if we would make it at all. But through it all, there was a constant prayer. I prayed like I had never prayed before. Sometimes I did not even have words. I just cried out, "God, help me. Please, help us." And slowly, piece by piece, he began to rebuild what I had broken. Trust is not rebuilt overnight. It comes in small, fragile steps. I gave David full access to my phone, my email, my social media. I stopped working at the gym where Jason was employed. I made every effort to prove that I was committed to change. But trust was not just about proving where I was or who I was with. It was about rebuilding my heart. I had to relearn what it meant to love my husband not just with words, but with actions. One evening, I found myself sitting across from David at dinner, and I realized how much I had taken him for granted. His hands were rough from work, his shirt smelled faintly of oil from his job, and there was exhaustion in his eyes. But behind that exhaustion was loyalty. Steadfastness. A love that had been tested but not destroyed. For the first time in years, I felt gratitude overwhelm me. Gratitude for the man who chose me even when I had failed him. Gratitude for the God who had not abandoned me in my sin. One night, I opened my Bible to the story of the prodigal son. As I read about the son who squandered everything and came crawling back, only to be embraced by his father, I wept. That was me. I was the prodigal wife, and God was the father who ran to meet me, even when I smelled of sin and regret. I shared that passage with David, and for the first time in weeks, we prayed together again. He prayed with a trembling voice, "Lord, help me forgive like you forgive. Help me love Sarah the way you love me." That prayer marked a turning point. One evening, a few months into our healing process, David and I sat on the porch watching the kids play in the yard. For the first time since my confession, he reached over, took my hand, and held it. "I do not know if I will ever forget," he said quietly. "But I am starting to see you again. The real you. The woman I married. And I think we might actually make it." Tears spilled down my cheeks as I whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." But deep inside, I knew the truth. It was not just David who had not given up on me. It was God. The road to redemption is not straight. It is filled with twists of doubt, hills of guilt, and valleys of shame. But with every step, I saw God's hand guiding us, pulling us out of the wreckage I had caused and setting us on a path to something stronger, something real. The first year after my confession felt like walking barefoot across shattered glass. Every step forward was painful, but each step also reminded me that healing was possible if I refused to stop moving. David and I carried scars, but scars are proof of survival. They are not signs of defeat, they are evidence that a wound was once there, but it no longer bleeds. Still, there were moments when I wondered if my marriage was only surviving, not thriving. Forgiveness had been extended, but trust still needed to grow roots. And so, I found myself asking, how does a broken marriage not only survive but become new? The answer came slowly, through God's word, prayer, and deliberate choices that David and I had to make every single day. It might surprise some people, but one of the hardest parts of rebuilding was intimacy. Not just physical intimacy, but emotional closeness. David carried a silent fear that I would never truly choose him again. And I carried a fear that I would never be worthy of his love. There were nights when he would pull away from me, not out of anger but out of fear of being hurt again. And there were nights when I hesitated to reach for his hand, afraid he might reject me. One night, I whispered through tears, "David, I feel like I broke us beyond repair." He took a deep breath and said, "Sarah, you did break us. But God is the one repairing us. Not you. Not me. Him." That moment shifted everything. I realized that intimacy would not come by pretending the past did not exist. It would come by acknowledging our scars and letting them remind us that God was capable of writing new chapters, even on pages we had torn apart. So we prayed before bed. Every night. Even if it was just a short prayer, even if we were still upset with each other. Those prayers were like stitches pulling our hearts back together. Several months later, temptation came knocking again, not in the form of Jason, but in the form of despair. I saw David struggling with trust. Even though he tried to hide it, I noticed the way he sometimes double-checked my phone or hesitated when I went out with friends. And instead of getting angry at him for not trusting me yet, I realized this was part of the consequence of my sin. Healing was not supposed to be instant. One night, after a counseling session that ended with more tears than answers, I almost broke down completely. Maybe we should stop trying, I told David. Maybe I ruined this too much. Maybe this is not worth the fight anymore. David's reply stunned me. Sarah, you may have broken our marriage, but I vowed before God to fight for it. Do you think His grace only works when things are easy? No. Grace shows its power when everything looks hopeless. I am not giving up. Not on us. Not on you. Not on God. In that moment, I saw my husband differently. He was not just a man trying to love me. He was a man being strengthened by the Spirit of God to love beyond human limits. And that realization broke me in the best way possible. Slowly, our marriage began to breathe again. Not the shallow gasps of survival, but the deep, steady rhythm of a second chance. We started new traditions. Every Saturday morning, instead of rushing into chores, we made pancakes with the kids and shared what we were grateful for. Every Sunday night, we read a scripture together as a family, no matter how busy life got. One night, while tucking the kids into bed, our oldest asked, "Mom, why do you and Dad pray so much now?" I smiled through tears and said, "Because God saved us, sweetheart. He saved our family." And I meant every word. There came a night, almost a year after my confession, when David and I sat on the porch again, watching the stars. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, peace filled the air. David turned to me and said, "Sarah, I forgive you. Fully. Completely. I may not forget what happened, but I refuse to let it control us anymore. I see the woman I fell in love with. And I love you, not because you are perfect, but because God gave you to me. And I am not letting you go." I broke down in his arms, sobbing. "I do not deserve you." And then he said something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. None of us deserve the grace God gives. That is what makes it grace. Looking back, I can see that my betrayal could have destroyed everything. But instead, it became the doorway to something far greater, a deeper faith, a stronger marriage, and a renewed understanding of God's love. I learned that sin may break us, but grace can remake us. I learned that forgiveness is not forgetting the past but choosing not to let the past define the future. And I learned that no matter how far we fall, God's arms are always open. If you are watching this, maybe you are standing in the ruins of your own mistakes. Maybe you think it is too late. Maybe you believe the damage is beyond repair. But I am living proof that God can bring beauty from ashes. Today, David and I are not perfect, but we are stronger than ever. Our love has been tested, purified, and renewed by the fire of trial. And I can tell you this with confidence: the moment my life changed forever was not when I fell into sin, and not even when I confessed. The moment my life truly changed was when I realized that forgiveness is possible, redemption is real, and God's love never fails. So if you are broken, if you feel unworthy, if you think you cannot be forgiven, look up. God is not done with you. Trust Him. Surrender to Him. And watch how He can turn your greatest failure into the beginning of your greatest testimony.